Well, hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to present both Dion McCormick, no relation, who's our lead solutions engineer, and Sarah Mitchell, who is in charge of documentation. Both of them have a short presentation to give to you today on different new topics and new features that have come out in Alpha Anywhere. But we're all also here to answer your questions, and you can type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let's get started. Dion, I'm going to take you here off mute. Dion, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter. And there's your screen.
Well, thank you, everybody. Hey, welcome back from the fabulous Thanksgiving. I think we had enough day where the effects have worn off. We're back into mode. But guess what? A couple weeks, boom, we're into Christmas. So we got a real short time, and we want to use that time to show you some really cool stuff. Stuff that's been out for a little while and something that's actually brand new, which is very exciting to me. Really opens up a lot of neat opportunities. But thank you again for taking the time to join us. And first and foremost, we're here for you. So if you have any questions, please go to your questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel, type them in there. Dave's going to be monitoring those very closely, and we'll try to get to any and all that are put in there. And as always, you can email us to guides, Guides, at alphasoftware.com. That's guides at alphasoftware.com to find out more about what we can do for you. And again, we're really oriented around what we can do for you. So your questions are super valuable to us, and it allows us to guide our presentations and also help you out. So take advantage of that, get that question in there, and we'll do what we can do. So as Dave mentioned, we have actually two different presentations. My esteemed colleague here, Sarah, is going to be doing a fantastic, very visual, very interesting presentation. I'm going to do something a little more mundane. It's not going to be as interesting. Obviously, she's a much better presenter, but I'm going to show you something really cool in the latest release, something that I came across, which I've kind of been itching for a while, and it really simplifies life, and it's going to open up a lot of neat opportunities for you. So with that, again, get your questions in. If you have questions on our topics as we go through there, get them in. We'll monitor them, get them to you. And then I'm going to do a quick demonstration, and then I'm going to hand it over to Sarah, and we'll go from there. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and jump right back here and go to the control bar. The control bar is a feature that's been in the software for some time. It is your way of managing that magic spot at the top and bottom of your mobile and web solutions, where you can put these very dynamic, very powerful menu systems or icon systems, and they kind of stick to the top and to the bottom. So they're always constantly present. And these are just some examples here. You can see we have these little buttons at the bottom. We got buttons up at top. We've got different types of things, like you can just put text up top, icons, etc. The benefit of this, and not to recap, we had a pretty good presentation on this a while back, but there's a lot going on up here. This is a critical navigation and indicator area. And what we wanted to be able to do very quickly was allow you to create very dynamic and powerful ones without having to make 100 controls in a UX. What we're finding out is people would put a panel header or panel footer here, and they'd put in controls, but after a while they had a ton of them and it was a lot of complexity. So we ended up making essentially a meta control that allowed you to recreate this and add a whole bunch of other features to it in a very short period of time. And it's continued to mature and improve over time. It's a go-to control for any kind of navigation and display needs. And today I want to show a new feature, which is often what we see people want to do with it, which is called the menu control inside the control bar. So let's go ahead and go back into my development environment. There it is. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and open up my development environment. And I've already created a very simple UX here. And the UX has a panel header at top. I've actually inserted a panel header, but you can see the control bar is not defined. So this area up top here is the panel header. And in here, I have a single control bar, but I haven't done anything to it. And then I have my core content down here, which then displays the information. So you can see I've got my content down here. I have a panel header, then I have a control bar in here. Now, control bar for a quick refresher is basically it's a meta control, is that instead of having 50 controls inside this panel header, we now have a single control and we double click and open it up to manage that. And so this, you can see you have a lot of flexibility in terms of things like dynamic data actions that are JavaScript fires, layouts. You can have multiple layouts, disclosures, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, and also adding your other pieces in there. Now, if you're just starting out, what will happen, and let me go ahead and replicate this so you can see what will happen. I'm sure you've come across this before, but let's make sure. So let's say you have a panel card and you say, you know what, I want to add a panel header to that. So I'm going to right click on that and say I want a panel header. It asks you this question saying, do you want to include a control bar? And I go, yes. And so that creates the panel header and puts my control bar right inside there, including making it the width to be 100% here. Now, when I want to edit that, I can go into my control bar. Now I'm going to do it manually, but just to let you know, we do have templates already built into Alpha, meaning that you don't have to start with a blank sheet of paper. You can actually go down here after you've opened the control bar, click the Insert Control Bar Template, and this will show a number of different pre-made templates, including menus and other stuff like that, that is available. And just to let you know, these are now a little dated. We've actually got a new menu control, which I'm going to show you today, but it still shows and lays out a basic one, then you can edit it from there. So I actually find it's pretty valuable and handy in terms of how to do it, but we've simplified things pretty dramatically. So if you want to start out, you can either start out with a blank or you can insert a control bar template and put it in there. Now, also very important is you can save the control bar as a template. So if you reuse this over and over, you don't have to kind of keep recreating it. You can save it as a template, and then the next time you go ahead and create a new control bar, you can just import your template, and all 90% of the work is there, and you have to just tweak it. Now, also extensive documentation is surrounding the control bar. We have both an API document and a user guide. The user guide is how to set it up. What are all these different elements there? And then we also have a full API that allows you to manipulate that control bar. And it really is nice. Very rich, very feature-rich capabilities here. So with that, go ahead and you can click on those and that will open up the documentation to show you more details on there. So let's dive in. One of the most powerful capabilities that people have is on their menus. Actually, let me go ahead and do this real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and create new. I'm going to go ahead and just create one of our defaulted templates. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to select panel navigator with tab buttons using control bars. So this has been around for a while. It's our original one there. And we'll go ahead and do this and just show you one of the most often used items in a control bar up top is the menu capability. Let's go ahead and show that, and voila. So now you have a menu that pops out with different menu items. Now, up to now, the way we built that was essentially by creating the menu items as individual buttons and then attaching them to a menu, what's called a disclosure, and then it would show it there. And it worked out great. You could set it up, a lot of flexibility, other pieces. But as you can see, you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you have a number of different controls. You have to kind of manage some things. There's a couple levels of indirection. So the idea is almost every control bar has a menu. It's really one of the fundamental items that you'll find in a control bar. So what the team did, the development team said, let's make life easier and actually make it more powerful by doing some things for the developer. And so let's go into our control bar and let's do that. So I'm going to open up my control bar. I currently don't have anything in my control bar, so I'm going to go here to items and I'm going to add a control bar item. And these have been in there for a while, but there's a new one here called button-drop-down menu. And this is my new capability to add a menu to my control bar. So I'm going to click OK. So now you'll notice I have my menu here. I can call it anything I want. I can create a button layout. Currently it's text. So let's change that real quick. I want to just show it as an image, and I'm going to select the icon for that image, and I'm going to use my built-in SVG. And we got a whole bunch of select far, and I'll just use the classic 3 hamburger menu kind of structure there. So it defaults here to be a image, but you can now defaults it to be text, but you can change it to image or use a combination. It's really up to you. One of the nice things too is you can also, add your own images. I'm using an SVG icon, but you can create your own images like little avatars and things like that. Makes it really, really fun from there. So we have this new thing called a control bar menu. And you'll see that it's like a button, but there's a key thing here called menu definition. So that's built into this control bar item. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And this may look very similar. It is basically similar to how you work with the expanding menu. Now there's two different menu types. I'm going to show you both. One is called cascading and the other is called expanding. So let me show you the cascading one first. And really they're just style differences. So the way we're going to define this menu is you have a couple different options. You can use a menu builder, which I'm going to use for our demonstration today, but you could also use a static JSON string, which is kind of handy, or you can use an Xbasic function. And guess what, guys? That's where it gets really interesting, because this will be sort of a static menu, but if you do a function, you can on the fly build your menu. So your menu can literally become a dynamic animal. And so therefore it can configure itself based on what's going on in the system. Very cool. But let's start out with menu builder. I've selected menu builder here. I'm going to use the style cascading and I'm going to go into my menu definition. And this, if you've done anything with the expanding menu, it's very handy. So I'm going to go home. Then I'm going to add another sibling here and I'll go module 1. Then I'll add another one here. I'll go module 2. Now, a cool thing about our menu structures is that they can be hierarchical. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to add an item called child, and I'm going to go module 1A. So that's our, let's call it submodule. We'll go submodule. And I'll do another one here and I'll go submodule 2A. Now, I'm going to come back and talk about it a little bit more, but I'm going to click OK. And so I've created my menu. And I will come back and show you a little more details on it. Then I can change some different things like the menu width, the color, so you can tweak it to make it work the way you want to. And you can say if you want animation or not. It really depends on your personal preference and the preference for the application that you're building. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Oh, I've got my menu item here, but I have to go over here to a layout and create at least one layout, because that will be the default layout. So I've got a layout already built into here. So I'm going to add a line and I'm going to add my menu into there. So you need one layout, and you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, and this is where you can add your other items. So if you have HTML or icons or things, and you can see this kind of gives you a show right there of what it looks like. So I'll click OK. Now that should accept it. So now I can go into my working preview. Now remember this is Cascade, so I'm going to go back and show you the other style. And so now I have my new menu here, my control bar. You'll see my menu. When I click here, you'll see that it creates this very nice menu. Look at how cool that is. One of the things I love is that it's got shading and the pulse effect and animation, so it really looks modern and professional. Now you'll notice how this one works is that when I hover over an item that has subchildren, it opens it over here on the right. That's called cascading, because it's cascading across here, as you can see from these items here. So let's go back into design and let's show the other, oops, we got to go into the control bar. Let's go in here to and I'm going to go into my definition, and I'm going to say in this case I want it to be an expanding menu. And now when I do the working preview, it's going to look like a little different animal. And again, you can pick, both of them work the same way from a functional standpoint, but it's more of aesthetics and how your screen layout works. So now I'm going to click here, and now you'll see that it uses a different metaphor for, instead of expanding the width of the menu, it basically extends the vertical there. And so you can see as I click these things, it opens up the subchildren, and you would even have multiple layers. You can go down a layer there. This is really nice, and this is what a lot of modern menu systems use for, especially dashboards or control panels or things like here. But I do find there are some times when it's nicer to have that cascade. This is really good for navigation structures, but let's say I had just a button on the screen. It allows you to do some pretty cool stuff there. So you can pick and choose. They both work the same from a fundamental feature capability. It's just more aesthetics of how you want it to work within your system from that standpoint. Now, a couple other quick things here is that now that I've defined that menu, I can go to town. So I can go in here and, for instance, I can say, you know, for home, I want to add an icon to that. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to go to my SVG icons and I'm going to go here to home and I'm going to add my little home icon there. And let's say for submodule 1, I want a different icon here. So I'll grab that and I'm just going to grab a different icon so we can see what it looks like. That looks a good one there. And then for submodule 2, icon here, and it's up to you. And again, you can, I'm using SVG, but you can use built-in. You could also bring in your own icons. There's a lot of fun stuff you can do from there and standpoint. Now, another thing you can do here while I'm here is when you click here, you have the on-click event. So each menu item has an on-click event. And in there, you can either write JavaScript or create your own action JavaScript and insert it in here. So for my purposes, I'm just going to go here. Actually, you know what? Let me do it on this module A so it doesn't get annoying. So I'll go in here and I'll go alert, hello. So I'm putting in my own JavaScript, but I could easily create my own action JavaScript and create the code to run it and insert it there. Okay. So let me go ahead and click OK. Oh, here, OK, and OK. So I'll save that. And we'll go ahead and do a working preview. Now you'll see I've maintained the same style. So it's a expanding menu structure here. But now you notice it has these nice little icons in there. Everything else works the same. And if I click on an item, which one is it? There, yeah, submodel 1. It runs that JavaScript. Now, I want to turn it over because I don't want to take all the time, but we're going to come back next time and I'm going to show you how you can populate this menu. You'll notice in here that I'm using the method for menu builder. I'm going to actually show you an Xbasic function on how to do that, which will make it very interesting there. But what's important on this is that this is all JSON. So you can generate your own JSON and put it together. So I can actually go into the menu builder and you'll see I've made a structure here, but check this out. This is the JSON data. And so this is how it's structured. You can see it has hierarchical structure with children, etc. You see it has the icons and the on-click event, etc. It's even nice enough, and this is what we'll focus on next time, to show you even what an Xbasic array looks like. So let me click on here. And this is where you can actually basically run this Xbasic and it will create the same JSON out and you can pipe that in there. So we're going to cover that a little more detail because I think it's very powerful to be able to have menus being data driven basically by backend systems there. So that's a quick introduction. The most powerful thing is it's a single control. You can see how easy it is to manage. It creates your layout. Notice there's only one here instead of 5 or 6 items with a button for every element, etc. So it makes for a very, I'd call it manageability is much higher and flexibility is also very, very high there. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to our friend Sarah, who's going to cover a different subject. And again, we'll come back and show you a little bit more about that new menu capability with the Xbasic function capability at a future event. Thank you very much.
And then after that, maybe we'll have some time for questions on what you just went over.
Oh, so yeah, I'd rather do those after I do with, I want to make sure Sarah gets the time.
Absolutely. Well, let's do that. Hey, Sarah, well, let me unmute you first of all. Sarah, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter.
All right, I need to do, hold on, I need to do some secret magic real quick.
Secret magic, all right, that's the best
secret
kind.
Magic, yeah. Sorry, folks. I thought I had this plugged in, but I just need to copy an API key from my secret API keys.
All right.
Which you will then see, but it will be it'll be deleted.
All right.
All right, can you see my screen okay?
I can see your screen, and it looks like you could be working on talking about the weather widget.
I am going to talk about the weather widget. So there's a, let me configure it real quick here. Actually, instead of that, let's delete this guy. There's a new little weather widget. I call it a widget. It's actually just a control, a new weather control in the current release. It's called Weather. And this interfaces with the AccuWeather API behind the scenes to pull down some forecast data. And this control, it's a really basic control. It requires an API key, which you have to sign up for. It takes your default city. Let's put Austin in there right now. And there's also a template. What you can put in here is a little limited, just because we don't expose a lot of data in this control for you to integrate here. But the control itself is based off of some other work that we've been working on behind the scenes. So I wanted to share that with you right after I show you how this renders. And it's going to look like that the first time you open it. You have to make it bigger. There we go. There we go. So this is what it does. It shows the current conditions and then the forecast for the next 3 hours or 4 hours. Pretty basic, pretty simple. But I mentioned previously that it was based on some other work we've been working on, a larger project. And in that project, we actually have like a view box that this weather widget was based off of. And I wanted to show you guys that because there's actually a lot more you can do if you have the underlying implementation. So this is the one I'm going to show you guys. It looks the same because it uses all the same styling and icons, but this one's a little more robust. It supports metric and imperial, and I've got this drop down up here just to demonstrate showing that information. So we got a lot of questions from people asking about support for Celsius for metric units, and it's kind of addressed this a little bit here. Also gonna share this project with you guys at the end of this webinar, but this is just what I wanted to show you, and it's all driven off the AccuWeather API. You'll have to go to their site and sign up for an account, and this will all look really, really complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. All it does is pull data from their API and then read it back out to do a number of things. The way the control works is in 3 steps. It has to decode or encode an address into a location ID, which they always recommend you do before you do any other queries because location IDs can change. I don't think it happens very often, but it happens enough that it sounds like it could be problematic if you just assume that the ID you pull down is always going to be the same. And their API supports more than just cities. They have a very long list of things you can look up based on location. This particular one goes against the locations cities search API off of their site, and that requires both an API key and the address you want to look for, and it returns a response that has a lot of stuff in it, but what you really only need for the next step, which is to fetch the weather conditions, is the key itself. And that's what this JSON path thing here is doing. It's parsing out the key value from this response. And the response has a number of other things, including handy links back to their site if you wanted to link to some more information there and some other information about what was given back to you. Fun fact, a lot of city names are not unique. There's a Portland, Maine, there's a Portland, Oregon. There's a Sydney, Australia, and I believe there's a Sydney somewhere in the United States. So the more specific you can be about that lookup address, the better off you're going to be. Because if you assume that the city you plugged in there is the one you're in, it might not actually be. So including the state or the country or any other information that might seem relevant in identifying a city is very helpful when you're entering that information in the weather widget itself to narrow those traces down. Anyway, if you're not fully confused yet, well, I'll keep working on confusing you. Anyway, after it gets that location from the address, it looks up the current conditions, which goes against the current conditions API. And then it formats that based on whether or not up here, that units thing I showed you where it was doing metric or imperial, it reads that value in. This is actually stored in a session variable up here at the top when this getWeather function is called. It's read out of the unit control, and when you're working with a viewbox with a custom Xbasic function that backs it, this is how you get the data out of a control. You go against the request variables v.r1.name of control, and if that exists, then you can certainly read the value out of there, which is great. But that I store that in that session variable, and then down here I read it again into units, and I just check to make sure it exists, because if you run this particular, actually if you run any component in working preview, I don't believe session variables are always there for you because they require the application server. So I just have these checks around this
that's
to
you have
make
to
sure
be very careful
to
about
fall
session
back on
variables.
something, and then the API key I fall back to nothing because I actually don't want this to work if you don't have a valid API key. But yeah, as Dion said, to be careful with that. So read the units out. It said they're going to be imperial or a capital M metric, and then I read the Accu key, which I've actually set up off in my server-side event on initialize already, so I don't have to keep copying it around. Then we go against the current conditions. We pass in the location and the API key into the location and API key properties on this, and then execute a curl response, which incidentally, you can get Alpha to auto-generate most of what you need here using the curl genie, curl command Xbasic. I literally went to their website, AccuWeather's backend website, their API website. I copied out a curl response, or a curl call, the URL, and I put it in here, and it showed me the Xbasic I needed. So that was how I got this. That's how I knew that I needed to create a curl response object, and that this was how I called it. And then I did a little bit of testing. If the response comes back as blank or is not 200 meaning okay, everything went fine, that's a fail condition, and we don't return anything. Otherwise, we read out the content, and then I map the content to a very specific array JSON format that the viewbox itself uses to populate the data. And if it was imperial, then this is the format I use, where I map temperature.imperial.whatever value unit or unit type into temperature value unit type. Otherwise, if it's metric, then we read out temperature metric.value.unit type and map it into those same values. And then I strip off the square braces on this because this is the first entry in a larger JSON array that I'm building, and return it. This right here too, I don't believe this is actually required anymore. There was a small issue where format map was, for whatever reason, lowercasing temperature in this very specific layout case, but that got fixed in the latest release. So I can actually probably just delete this, but I'm going to ignore that for now. So get all that built together, we return that small JSON block, which is going to have this little format here. And then up here, we get it back. We store it in current variable, and then the next one is get the 12-hour forecast, which is down here. This one's a little simpler. I just get the units. I test if it's metric. I set this metric variable to the text true, not the Boolean true. This is a text value. Otherwise, it's false. Pull out the API key, call against the forecast, hourly 12-hour API with the location ID, the API key, and whether or not I want to pull out metric. I set all those arguments down here. This is where we make the call. This is where we check the response. If it's good, I just return JSON out, which up here, oh no, if it's not good, if it's bad, I'm very confused. Oh, sorry about that. All right, if this fails, if it's not 200, we just return JSON out, which is initially defined as a blank string. Otherwise, we return the content itself. And that content is in that other format that I was mapping the current conditions to, because current conditions comes back in a different JSON format than the 12-hour forecast. And then here I squish them together. And then I return the final result back to the view box, which renders it. Any questions?
Can you show us the view box that you created?
I can. I wanted to go through the nitty-gritty technical details first. So yeah, the view box itself, I don't know why it doesn't show
And
this.
then there's another good, actually, it's a great question, and that is,
Yeah.
is it, sorry, let me turn up my volume a little bit. Is it possible to utilize the code from the GPS signal and present the weather based on that current location? I think you'd have to make one extra hop
Yeah,
from the GPS
there's a
location
way
to a,
to, they have, I think they have a lat long option for passing in your latitude and longitude into their search system, and
Cool.
they'll return you the closest location. That's going to be a different API call than the
So
city lookup.
where would you go if you wanted to learn a little bit more about the API calls for AccuWeather? Is it just simply AccuWeather.com or
Not
AccuWeather.com/developer?
exactly.
Okay.
I actually just searched for it. It's their AccuWeather. Oop, if I spell it correctly.
Oh, and I'm sure someone's going to ask about AccuWeather pricing, which is
That's, yeah, they have a basic free package of like 50 calls a day.
yep.
This is, you just go to developer.accuweather.com, and that's where all the information is. Some of this stuff is gated behind like a paid account. Others are not. Everything that I'm talking about right now, here's the locations API. You can make free calls to this to a point. Search by location key.
And after that, it's not terribly expensive. It's something you want to roll out to lots and lots of people. Like I think it's many, many thousands of calls
There we
for
go.
about $20 a month.
Yeah, so if you wanted to look up the location based on lat long, you would do a geoposition search to answer that person's question.
That's great.
So that's all in here. You can play around with it. These are the types of responses you can get back, and an extremely detailed response set of data comes back to you. So it's a little, I feel like a little too verbose in some situations, but they have one of the best coverages in terms of international forecasts. I know initially when we were looking into this, we looked at National Weather Service, but they just only cover the United States. So that's
Right.
where you can do that info. Yeah, you're gonna have to go up here to their packaging and pricing. I'm still currently apparently logged in, so I'm just gonna stick to the API reference page. But yeah, their prices aren't too bad. So, and certainly, like if there's some other weather service out there, they're like, oh, I'd rather use their API. It actually only services what I need. You can certainly swap that out for what's in here. I don't know why this is not showing a preview of my fields when I have an Xbasic function definition. I'm gonna have to ask questions about that.
Okay.
But the layout itself is pretty much identical to the hourly forecast one. Set temperature.value. There's a precipitation probability in here. And then I have this function called getWeatherIcon and format date that are defined in this component. Format date just changes it to hours with AM, PM. And then my getWeatherIcon uses some magic that we came up with to just get the weather icon out of an SEG icon set that is included in this component. So I can show you that. Exit without saving, yes. That icon set. I wonder if I can just look at the icons themselves. I'm gonna do that instead. Icon. There we go. So these are the weather icons. They were actually
Ooh.
part
Are
of a
these
larger
new?
library.
Yeah. Are these new now
There,
to Alpha?
I'm
I think they
not sure
might be.
if we integrated these into the SVG icons or if they're strictly embedded into the weather widget itself.
Gotcha.
Because they're part of a larger icon library that I actually thought I should point this out. Weather icon font. It's this weather icons guy. They're
Oh,
free. They come as a CSS font or SVG, and I think he even includes PNG versions in here. But they're very nice. I like them a lot. And with the AccuWeather API, they actually return an icon number that you're supposed to use to look up their icons in their icon library, which are very detailed and not great when it rendered a small size. So I went and I found this icon set and we mapped those icons to these ones for something a little more simpler looking.
got it. Cool.
But they've got everything in here, including moon phases, time, wind directions, the Beaufort wind scale, which is great. So.
And remember, on flat icons, that's another resource people can tap into for
Oh,
really
that's a
cool
great one. Yep.
SVG ones.
You can certainly go to flat icon. Where's the chat window? But there we go. Let me paste these in here. There you guys go. Yeah, so these are basically the two resources backing this widget. And I know that getting that Celsius support in there is huge and a must for anyone who lives outside the continental United States. So I will we'll take a look at that. But this whole thing that I just showed you, I already made a GitHub project for it. And I'll put the link in there as well. You can check this out locally. It's this entire component that I've just built, that I've just showed you here, with mostly pre-configured stuff. You're going to have to enter your own API key, which has to go in this onDialog initialize event for now. But using session variables is a great way to kind of control things behind the scenes. And I believe the only thing this refresh button does is call the viewbox control action to refresh this forecast control.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's it for questions on the weather control. So let's head back to Dion. There are a few questions, though, on what you were talking about, and specifically on the menus that you're creating. Can you change the icons that appear in your menus based on code?
Absolutely.
All right, Sarah, I'm going to make Dion the presenter. I'm stealing presenter away from you.
Sure.
All
right, Dion, you should be all set. Okay, great. I can see your screen.
And that really, this applies both to the menu and the control bar, excuse me, but also the expanding menu control. You can add, we have also what's called the expanding menu control. Mm-hmm. And both of them use the same fundamental capabilities. But the important thing about it is that the menu definition, when it's all said and done, is JSON. So you can see in here, my home is this JSON right here, is which home is there. So if I want to just go ahead and edit, I could do that. So there are commands that allow you to load this JSON into the menu, and then the menu will re-render itself based on that JSON. That's what I'd like to cover next time, go in a little more detail. But what this allows you to do is to basically render your own menu structure. It's a standard structure, it's documented, and allows you to do that. And so we'll show you some examples, but now you can say, okay, in this case, this icon here, you may want to change the color to like red because some other thing in the system changed. So you can not only change icons, but you can change coloring of icons and other things along those lines. And that makes for a very dynamic and robust way to present information in the menu system. And you can add new items to the menu as needed. Now, you can do that dynamically, but also real quick reminder is that built into the menu builder is the security group. So if you have security enabled, you can say, for instance, submodule 2 or module 2, excuse me, only administrators can see that module, and Alpha will take care of rendering the menu for you, meaning it will remove the items that you're not allowed to see. So you can either have Alpha do it from a security standpoint on a show hide. You can also do it in here in terms of rebuilding the whole menu and populating it yourself. And last but not least is you can use a show hide expression to actually say, you know, in these scenarios, it's not necessarily security, but because of a session variable or whatever it happens to be, I think this has to be client side. It allows, oh no, this is server side. So before it builds and sends it to the browser, you can say, you know what, only show module 2 when like session variable, you know, session dot mode is equal to edit. So what will happen is Alpha on the server side will evaluate this expression, and if it is true, then it will show this if it's false. And so that's kind of cool. You can, there's sort of like different ways to do it. You can either just have Alpha do the show hide for you. You can use security groups to limit what people can see. And last but not least is you could literally render your whole new menu and render it as you see fit. So any of those are available to you within the menu generation system. The power of this, of generating, is that you can change every aspect of it. This is really just visibility, security group visibility, show hides visibility. When you render your own thing, you can render everything, even the text. This, I mean, it makes for nice multilingual because you can do things multilingual. You can also, you know, if the current status is French, then, you know, build a French menu and put it in from that standpoint with the terms that are in there, along with different icons, etc. And the icons are powerful because, as I mentioned, you may have 2 or 3 different icons, like one with an alarm on it that says, oh, you know, module 1, maybe you change that to a different color or an alarm so people know that there's something to look at that menu. So again, we'll cover that in a little more detail so you'll know how to use that. But it makes for just an incredibly dynamic capability. That's another reason we wanted to insert it into the control bar. Is when we had the expanding menu, you could do that. But in the control bar, you kind of had to pre-build your control bar. It was a little bit more of a structured approach. With the new button drop-down menu in the control bar, and now you can use these more dynamic capabilities, and it really just reduces the complexity of managing a more complex control bar. One thing that's interesting, the last note, is as I showed here, it was really generated to support the mobile environment, meaning that when the control bar was initiated, it was about, okay, what's on a mobile phone, that header and footer at the top. But do remember that you're not limited to mobile to use these components. So more and more people are using the control bar in a header on like a website. And in that case, then there's a lot of really dynamic things you can do up in the header. And so therefore we're realizing, oh man, it'd be nice to have some of these other features built into the header, you know, or built into the control bar to make it easier to implement more complex, say, web-based dashboard headers or menu systems or things along those lines. And so a lot of fun, and we're going to be exploring this more, but really want to show you more of a dynamic method to manage this information going forward. But great question, really appreciate it.
Cool. And now for a question not about either of those topics. It has to do with panel cards. This person writes in that they've tried using panel cards in the past, but they were unable to figure out how to navigate programmatically. Could you show the viewers how you move from card to card using programmatically as opposed to swiping?
Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and create a UX component here. I'll just use a blank one. And just to demonstrate this, I'll use a panel navigator. So I'm going to go here to the controls, go down here to the panel, and let me go ahead and open this up a little bit. I could go ahead and lay it out, you know, put a navigator and some cards in there, but we have this capability called quick panels where I can click there, and there's pre-made ones, or I can insert a defined one. So for instance, again, so I don't go too quick, I'm going to click Insert Predefined Layout, and then I'm going to do a panel navigator with 3 panel cards. So you can see it just does this little nomenclature. It's like a shortcut, and then I put it in there and it builds it. And so that's a quick way to build your panel cards without having to sit there and right click and do everything there. So let's go ahead and save this. I'll go panel card programmatic. And let's go ahead and show how this works here. So we'll go ahead and go in. Now we'll go here. And you'll see it's kind of, you'll see it's got static text up here. I'm gonna click and drag, and you're gonna see that I'm manually moving these back and forth. So I can go to the second panel card, then I can go to the third panel card. So basically I've got 3 panel cards and I'm manually moving for them. Now the way that is structured is through what's called the navigator type. So when you insert a panel navigator, it defaults to carousel, which is that behavior. It basically is like a carousel. I can keep swiping, and it'll just go through this loop, through this loop, through this loop. But as you can see, there's other methods that are available. Orientation change, where it'll automatically show one panel card when it's portrait versus landscape. That's all handled for you. You can also use a list control. There's some other cool ones there, but the one I think we want to focus on here is called programmatic. So what that means now is it basically disables the swipe gesture recognition. So when I'm using it, the only way I can navigate is programmatically, meaning somehow telling the panel navigator, or excuse me, yes, the navigator to show. So I can click, I'm clicking and holding it and nothing's going on here because it's saying, oh, I'm ignoring those gestures here. So now I'm gonna go ahead and create a panel header. I'm not gonna use a control bar because I just wanna make this simple. And now I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna include a button on here. And I'm just gonna call it navigate for now, okay? So I've got a new button up here called navigate. And I'm going to go ahead and double click on that button to open up the action JavaScript builder. So I'm going to click add new action. When I'm in here, I'm going to type the word panel because there are panel actions. There's a whole suite of them. And you can sit here and say, okay, here are all the different ways you can manipulate panels programmatically. So I'm going to show you the navigate, but you can set a specific active panel. You can hide certain things. You can set the URL of an iframe in there. You can remove a panel from a panel navigator. That's like if you're using dynamic. It's pretty cool. So I'm going to click navigate. Then I'm going to go ahead and select which panel navigator I'm going to act on. In this case, I only have one, so it's showing you the single navigator one. And then the navigate is, okay, what do I want to do? First, next. So this allows you to build sort of navigation tools to do like history navigates, like where they're bumping around things. So I'm just going to go next. So the idea is when I click this, I just want it to go to the next panel card in the list. So I'll go ahead and click save. Now, go, and I would probably put a nice little icon there and make it look a little prettier, but it'll just be text for now. So I've got my button here. I'm on my first panel card. When I click here, notice what happens. It navigates to that second spot. And I click again. Sorry, little cough, had to just prevent that. Now notice something. I'm clicking on the navigate button. It may not be very recognizable there, but I'm at the last navigate, so there's no next card to go to. So because I'm going in here and doing this navigate action, you know, you may want to have to put in first, next, last, etc., to be able to add the full navigation that you're looking for there. Now, that is how I'm navigating using Action JavaScript. So what's cool about this is I can convert this into an Action JavaScript, and I'm going to call this next card is what I'm going to call that. So now I have a next card in my JavaScript action. So anywhere I want to make it go from one card to another, I just have to call this JavaScript action. And here is the code for that. Actually, I'm sorry, is here. I can just run that. And so it allows me to do some interesting behaviors there. Now, oops, screw that up. So we'll leave it alone. Now, I've been doing this in JavaScript through JavaScript actions, but if I want to do it with the server side event, it's pretty straightforward. So let me go ahead and add another one here. So I'm going to go button, and I'll call this navigate server. And we'll go ahead and get rid of the returns here. So I'll go and navigate server. Now what I'm going to do here is, instead of actually triggering here, I'm going to go ahead and add an AJAX callback. And I'll call this navigate. And create the function, paste it in there, and go OK. So now I have this callback just to show how from a server side I can manage the front end. So now I'm going to go back into my actions here. I'm going to get the code for this. I'm going to close this and click OK. I'm going to go to my Xbasic functions, and now I'm just going to say when that Xbasic callback is called, what I'm going to send back is that JavaScript action. So again, you want to generate your JavaScript actions, because now it's very easy to trigger them from both sides. So it's going to actually behave the same way, but it's going to work a little differently because everything in one is client side and the other is there. So let me go ahead and show you this real quick. So I've got my navigate here, but watch when I click navigate server, you'll see the little circle thing, and then you'll still see I'm navigating here. So programmatically, the way I do things is I set up my navigation as action JavaScript. So for instance, let's say you have a situation where if someone does something, I want to show panel card number 3. But I want the server to determine what panel card they should be seeing at any one time. So I can just create my action to go to panel card number 3. And then on the server, whenever I do an Xbasic callback, I can just see that I can just send that JavaScript back to the front end, and it will make the user interface change to show that panel card 3. So I start with the client side work by using the JavaScript actions, etc. And then from there, I can then include it in my Xbasic actions by just sending back that little piece of JavaScript to say, do this action. And that can be pretty sophisticated kind of scenario. So panel navigator, make sure you change it to navigator type programmatically. And then what you want to do is in here use, that's the run action. I already converted it. Use the panel actions action type, which allows you a whole bunch of different things you can use. And that will kind of generate the JavaScript you need to be able to programmatically move around your user interface. Once you got the feel for it, it'll become second nature and very powerful, because basically you can trigger this at any time and kind of take control of the interface to show only what you want to show at the appropriate time.
Very cool. All right, so one other question here, back to control bars, and
Yes.
The question is on, they had done an implementation, I guess, using a tab control, which had a login indicator up at the top right corner, which I guess indicated that you were logged on, who you were. Can you do something like that on a control bar?
Yes, absolutely. So the idea behind a control bar is you have a series of items, and items are things that exist in your control bar. So you'll see in our case, we created one single item, then we had our layout here, go here, and you'll see I have this layout and I put that on that layout. And the nice thing is you can have multiple layouts, so you can have different scenarios on how you want to work it. So there's a couple ways you can handle this. First, if you just want to have one control bar, I'm going to go ahead and create an item here. And I'm just going to create a HTML item, which is just some HTML, which could include images. So for instance, I'm going to go ahead here and I'm creating the HTML item, and the text here, I'm actually going to insert an image. So I'm inserting a little icon in there just to show an icon on the control bar. So we'll just grab one of these, our favorite little thing there. And it just puts there, but you could put any HTML you want in there. It's very flexible here. So now I've created my item. I can go to my control bar layout and I can do one of two things. One is I could create a new layout that has that icon on it, and then pick and choose which control bar I want to show at any one time. Or I can go into here, add that icon in there, or that HTML item here, so it's on the same one. Now you'll notice here's my rendering down here. I've got both of those elements here. But we can go back to items and you'll see that there's something called the show expression. So this is very similar to the expanding menu concept, i.e. you can define the things you want to show and then on the fly hide and show them using the show expression. So you'll see I can go in here. Now, very important, this is client side. So it's going to want to use JavaScript to render it. So the control bar is on the fly going to show and hide these items via show expression. When I was on the other menu, before the menu was sent, we used a server-side expression. So you just got to be a little careful to know which scenario you are here. So for instance, let's go ahead and just go in here, and I'm going to put 1 is equal to 0. So 1 is equal. So that actually translates to false. It's a false result. So let's go ahead and show our working preview here. And what's going to happen is when it goes to render the user the control bar, it's going to run that little expression, and then if it says false, it doesn't show the icon. Now I can go back in here, and I can go back into this, and I can say, well, if 1 is equal to 1, which is a true scenario, now I can go into my working preview, and if it's done correctly, I should be seeing my little icon up there in the right-hand corner. So on the fly, I can control. And the nice thing is there's my little icon that's available. And that could be a button. It could be a menu, showing a menu, etc. Now that's kind of artificial. Usually what you have is you have some kind of field on there. So let's go ahead and I'm going to put a field in here, text box, and I'll go show hide is the name of the text box. And I can then go in here and say, like show is the default. So now on my control bar, I can go back into my show expression here, and I can actually put in JavaScript to say, for instance, insert a field here. So I'm going to insert that field. Ooh, interesting. I'm on a pre-release. I wonder if that's a little gotcha. It did that. I'll have to go back and identify that. But the insert the field would point me so I could actually grab the value of this show hide and then do the equality test. So you could say, if field, and actually I think the way we can do it, and I'm just gonna try this real quick. So bear with me. I'm just gonna, that's a little thing I'll have to figure out. So get value of control name, show hide, okay. So I'll cut that out there. I'll go back into my controls. I'll go in here. This may or may not work. We'll see, but it's worth the try here. So I'm going to go in here, is equal to, and then I'm going to put in single quotes, show. Okay. And I won't put I don't know if that's going to break it. So normally I just click insert field and something's up, but I'm actually just going to get the value for that and go here. So bear with me as we'll go ahead and do this. Now, if this worked, we'll see if it did, we should see, there it is. So it passed hide. Now, notice when I changed that, it didn't change this, but let me go back in here and show you here. And let me go ahead and do here and do a working preview. And it should not show it. Yep, it's missing here. Now, even if I go and change it here, it's not refreshing this control bar. So what you can do is on the show hide, I can actually trigger a refresh of the control bar if I change that value. But in the control bar, there's also what are called watch expressions, where you can actually identify and watch things on the screen, so it makes it a little easier. So there's a couple different places. Just to demonstrate how easy it is to refresh a control bar, I'm going to go here and add, I'll do it in the show hide. I'm going to go here to the on change event. I'm going to add a new action here, and I'm going to go to my control bar actions right here. And I'm going to say the action I want to do is refresh the control bar and control bar 1. And I'm going to make it animated just to make it very clear that this does there. So basically when I change the value of this, it's going to trigger a refresh of my control bar. So now we should see when we change it, okay, there's hide, it's not shown. So I'm going to go in here and go show, tab out of it. You saw a little flicker. What it did is it refreshed this in an animated fashion, and now my icon is available there. And so this could be happening behind the scenes. The user may need to see it, There's a couple different ways you can do it. You can either do it with change events on here. There's also ways to add what are called watch events to a control bar. So there's different ways. But the idea is this control bar can on the fly reconfigure itself based on what the state of the application is. And that's one of the most powerful capabilities, is that on the fly, you can really just modify it. So if you're in this situation, you show these controls, etc. And the nice thing is now you'll notice I still just have one control here. I didn't have to create 5 or 6 and containers with show high results, etc. It just creates a more manageable and controllable environment than you would get if you did it all manually there. And so the control bar is really powerful, really fun to use, and then very flexible. You can use it in a bunch of different situations. And now with that control bar menu capability, it's gotten even more powerful in terms of implementing very powerful navigation and management user interfaces.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We are out of time. I want to thank Sarah Mitchell for her presentation.
Way to go, Sarah.
AccuWeather and all
You're
of her
welcome.
work and documentations. And I want to thank Dion for presenting, as well as all of you, especially those of you who took the time to ask us questions. We hope to see you next week at the next Alpha Anywhere Demo and Q&A webcast. Have a great day. Bye-bye.